This is GFree Radio. Here's your host, Peter Stewart.
Episode 60, can you believe it, of the GFree Radio Show? Hello, I'm Peter Stewart, and boy oh boy, what we go through to bring you the GFree Radio Show each week as we sit here in the studio. It's around about 25 degrees outside, pretty warm for London in June, and our mind turns naturally enough to a barbecue. Gluten-free, of course. This week we have a chat with Gigi Stewart, no relation, who has some great tips on how to run or survive a great summer cookout. It's the food, it's the condiments, and also it's the utensils as well. It's the politeness that you can say something to your host without a fear of offending, or if you're running a barbecue, it's what to do so you look after your guests, so you can all have fun in the sun without getting the runs. In our health spot, we bring you the new case report of the 75-year-old man with Parkinson's disease, who's said to have made a dramatic recovery when he was put on a gluten-free diet. We've got the background about what caused the doctors to make that recommendation. Plus, in food news, how Italians claim to have developed coeliac-friendly gluten. Yep, a team there says they've worked out how to get the bad stuff from wheat so it can be used to bake with. Really interesting idea. Oh, and we got the recipe for a gluten-free pizza base made from juicer pulp. And a question we got asked this week, is there gluten in glutinous rice? Kind of suggests that there might be, and we'll give you the answer a little bit later on in the show. From Coeliac UK, well, you would have got this in the mail last week if you remember, their pledges on what they're set to do over the next year. Topics under discussion, things like their pledge on diagnosis, support, food availability, research, food prices, labelling and eating out. We'll run through those for you if you're not a member and try and persuade you to become one. Oh, and don't forget our tweets of the week. We won't.
Feel free for gluten-free. Say, feel free to polish off their pasta, devour their desserts, relish their ready meals, savour their savoury bakes, munch on their muffins, grab their granolas. Whew, there's certainly lots of choice in the Feel Free for gluten-free range. Visit feelfreefoods.co.uk.
So, hope you've had a really good week and you haven't been glutened. Oh dear, I was glutened in the week. It must have been... perhaps I should keep a list, actually. This is the first time I've been glutened this year. It was not much fun, and also got some really new and worrying symptoms as well. And I know the symptoms that some people get are very often very, very different. I understand that some people don't get symptoms at all, and you might be thinking, gosh, I wish that was me. But also it's very worrying because, of course, then you don't know what damage has been done to your insides without you realising. So at least if you are unwell, it shows you and warns you that what you've eaten was bad, and you could be warned off going to that particular place or stepping up your precautions so it doesn't happen again. But this week, the day job, and someone brought in some clearly labelled but homemade, I grant, gluten-free cupcakes. They were really well labelled, and I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to go for this. They're in a nice box. They had a good label on the front saying all the ingredients, and it clearly said gluten-free, and I tried one. That was about 9:30 in the morning. I won't go into details, incidentally, if you're reaching for the on-off button. And what was it, about 1:30? I had to take the car into the garage, and it had to be there at a certain time. And boy, I was racing to get the car into the garage, not breaking the speed limit. And when I got home with about 10 or 15 minutes to spare until I had to make tracks for the bathroom. But as I posted on our Twitter feed earlier on in the week, it was particularly unusual because the symptoms were very different from what I've had before. It was, as I say, about 15-20 minutes before I had to make tracks for the smallest room. It was complete, sudden lethargy, fatigue. I just kind of collapsed. It was like the body going into a shutdown mode, and I thought, this is not right. Fortunately, I was at home. I was able to lie on the bed, and could barely move, not in pain, although I knew something was wrong. There was some just kind of strange feeling. And then what happened was I didn't actually feel... I'm sorry about this. We'll get on to the health news in a moment. Well, you know our address. If you want to pop through your symptoms or your celiac story, feel free. That's not a problem at all. It's what we're here for. So the body went into kind of shutdown. Got the strange feelings in the stomach. It wasn't a pain for a long time. And then we got the feeling as though, not a nauseous feeling, but it's strange to describe. If I say it was kind of like a kind of hairball, not in the throat, not in the stomach, but in the chest, about halfway between the two, where I wanted to kind of expel, to choke it up, to cough it up, but it wasn't a feeling of nausea. Have you had that? And then 10 or 15 minutes later, when I was in the smallest room, boy oh boy, it was double. Let's put it that way. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. Then the kind of strange feeling in the ears, that the whole hearing went very, very muffled indeed, really, really sweaty, and also, well, the body was under a huge amount of stress and racking with pain, and I wouldn't like to say that I was going to pass out. But I don't think I was too far from it, to be quite honest. It was not a nice experience, but that taught me a lesson. And then, of course, you have the moral, ethical decision, don't you? The girl, Julia, at work, had brought these in. She had bought them at a school fair. You're kind of saying, aren't you, well, Peter, your own worst enemy for doing that. With the best of intentions, and shared them around the office and other non-celiacs. There's a couple of us in the office, in the day job, and everyone else had them as well, of course, because they can. Do I then say to Julia, I got unwell eating your cupcakes? Boy, yeah, but fortunately I only had one, despite I just used the plural there. I decided not to, because I thought to myself, you know what, it's not worth it. She's not going to buy from that stall again. She would feel bad, embarrassed, awkward. If I said that, it's not going to help anything. So I just decided not to. Okay, that was. Oh, and there was something else this week as well. We went to. Well, I'll bring you that story a little bit later on. But let's crack on with the show proper. And as we usually do, we'll start off. Hello there, with this story, really, really intriguing, from SOTT.net, SOTT.net. If you want to read up a bit more about this, dramatic recovery in a Parkinson's patient with gluten-free diet, because their second headline, could gluten's toxicity extend to the nervous system, producing symptoms identical to classical Parkinson's disease? A new case study adds to a growing body of research indicating that wheat's neurotoxicity is greatly underestimated. Goes into quite a bit of detail, but we'll just bring you the bullet points on this. It's about this remarkable new case report describing the dramatic recovery of a 75-year-old Parkinson's disease patient after following a 3-month-long gluten-free diet, reveals the need to explore whether there's an increased prevalence of non-celiac gluten sensitivity, both in those afflicted with Parkinson's disease and the related multifactorial neurodegenerative condition known as Parkinsonism. So all this published in the Journal of Neurology. The report notes that celiac disease often manifests with only neurological symptoms, even in advanced age. Interesting, it's more than brain fog or the gluten brain. I know it's really well documented, isn't it, about the gut-brain axis, and how gluten can really affect people not just with that fog, but also in depression or bipolar. That's quite well documented and talked about. And it says here that obviously gastrointestinal complaints are the most commonly noticeable symptoms, but when the voluminous published literature on gluten-related adverse health effects is taken into account, so-called out-of-intestine expressions of intolerance to gluten-containing grains are far more common than gut-related one. No fewer than 200 distinct adverse health effects implicated. I think we've used that 200 figure before, all the different symptoms that show that you could have celiac disease. But that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Out-of-intestine expressions of intolerance to gluten-containing grains. Schizophrenia, mania, autism, peripheral neuropathy, and so on. Central nervous system particularly sensitive to the adverse effects. Anyway, let's go back to this case study. A 75-year-old man presented with a 1-year history of difficulty walking, instability and fatigability. His neurological examination revealed facial hypomemia, reduced facial expressions in other words, extreme slowness of movements and reflexes, the actual name is bradykinesia, rigidity and postural instability. They did a brain scan, they did some lab blood work, they did a duodenal biopsy, and as a result the gastroenterologist prescribed a gluten-free diet. And let's cut to the chase, because remarkably after only 3 months of abstinence from gluten, the patient reported an almost complete remission of symptoms, subsequently confirmed by a neurological evaluation. 18 months later he was re-examined and was found to have improved further. Now, let's put a bit of a caveat here at the end. The patient did not see measurable improvements in the dopaminergic abnormalities discovered in his brain scan, which the report says would be expected in classical Parkinson's disease, which is marked by the degeneration of the dopamine-producing cells in the substantia nigra of the brain. The authors, therefore, are not suggesting that celiac disease caused Parkinson's disease in the patient, but celiac disease exacerbated Parkinsonism in this case. And it says that it does illustrate the possibility that a number of patients diagnosed with Parkinson's disease are suffering from previously unidentified and unreported gluten-associated Parkinsonism, which from the outside clinical presentation can look identical. And finally, this report says those people who would benefit greatly from removing the cause of the neurological problems, namely gluten or wheat removal, are often overdiagnosed and overtreated with drugs aimed at alleviating Parkinson's disease, but which ultimately can lead to accelerated degeneration of endogenous dopamine production in the brain, enhanced neurotoxicity due to drug metabolites, and the production of movement disorders that are far worse than or were never present within the pre-treatment condition. Interesting stuff. My reading of that, many things coming out of that for me, and one of them is that people with Parkinson's disease may have an underlying intolerance to gluten which isn't being diagnosed. It's being misdiagnosed as another symptom of Parkinson's disease affecting the brain. Some of those patients are having their drugs increased to cope with that perceived brain abnormality with Parkinson's disease, when actually they don't need to be taking those extra drugs. They just need to be coming off the gluten. And that, to my mind, will be a fantastic step forward. Interesting stuff. Really glad that we came across that during the course of the week, and hopefully you are too. It's all grist to the GFree meal, isn't it? It's another bit of information that can help you make sense of what you're going through, or help join up the dots or colour in the squares of what you see in other people. maybe in your family or somebody else. It may be that you have a friend or a relative with Parkinson's disease, that you can maybe pass that information on to help them. It may be that you are being treated, or someone else you know is being treated for some other brain problem, and you may be able to suggest to them that coming off gluten may help alleviate that problem. We often say on the programme, I'm not a doctor, we're giving you the information, what you draw from this and you take to your health practitioner is up to you. But SOTT.net, SOTT.net is where that information is from the Journal of Neurology. And you heard about it on GFree Radio. You can always get in touch with the show, of course, gfreeradio@hotmail.com, whether it is to pass on your ideas, your suggestions. Maybe it's something you come across, an article or a bit of research. Maybe it's because you want to tell your celiac story. Maybe you're starting up your own celiac or gluten-free business. Wherever you are in the world, we're based in London. Heck, we've got to be based somewhere. And why not? One of the best capital cities in the whole of the world. It sounds like a good place for us to be broadcasting from, and where our studios are based. That sounds really, really good to us. So wherever you are in the world, do get in touch, drop us a line, say hello, pass on your thoughts about the show. You can always record something if you want on your smartphone and email it through to us, gfreeradio@hotmail.com. Or if you want to get more involved in the show and perhaps spread a bit of publicity, maybe you want to run an advert or sponsorship in some sort of way, then do get in touch with us as well. Or follow us on Twitter. We're at GFree Radio.
Feel free for gluten-free, say feel free to polish off their pasta, devour their desserts, relish their ready meals, savour their savoury bakes, munch on their muffins, grub their granolas. Whew, there's certainly lots of choice in the Feel Free for gluten-free range. Visit feelfreefoods.co.uk.
Summertime and the living is easy, as the song says, and the thrill of the grill is beckoning, certainly in June in the Northern Hemisphere. We're coming into summertime. Hard luck, guys, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere and you're going into your winter. But what comes around turns around, doesn't it, as the saying goes. And we're really looking forward to the summer holidays. And it may be that you've got a national holiday coming up in your part of the world, something like, I don't know, July the 4th or Bastille Day in France, where you can get out into the summer sun, and it's a really good excuse for a barbecue. Get out into the yard or the garden, or maybe a street party, something like that. Throw a few prawns or burgers onto the barbecue, and but hold on. You only want to be having the burger that's being flipped. You don't want to be flipping out over a little bit of gluten in your food. And that can be a really big problem, can't it? Because it's not only the food itself, because you can probably avoid to a large extent something like a sausage, because you think to yourself, you know what, that's probably going to have wheat in it. You can avoid that. You can just go for something which is full meat, like a chicken drumstick or a chicken wing or something like that. That's fine. But what about that cross-contamination? You know, Gigi Stewart on her blog wrote a really great article, and we wanted to speak to her about it, so we can put it in audio form, if you like. Oh, and don't forget, as a kind of sidebar here, if you've written a fantastic blog that you think we ought to be talking to you about, then do get in touch, gfreeradio@hotmail.com. But anyway, back to Gigi. She wrote this great article, and we thought we needed to get an audio form of that on the G-Free Radio podcast, so we got in touch with her, and we're about to present just that. Little bit of interference on the line, but we did try dialing back Gigi a couple of times, and still that kind of shushing noise in the background, so hopefully it won't detract from your listening pleasure. But I tell you what, just imagine that it's the waves gently breaking on the seashore, and that'll put you in the right mood to listen to Gigi's advice on running or going to the best G-free barbecue of your life.
We are in the heart of the South, and we enjoy barbecuing nearly year-round, so it's a very important part of our food culture here.
And what kind of things are you throwing on the flames?
We are putting everything from sausages that are custom made at our local butcher shop to nice hot dogs and hamburgers, chicken, just about anything you can imagine.
Okay, so let's go through a few of these tips that you've kindly put together, and we'll give you... We'll give a note of where people can actually see all this written down right at the end. So first of all, well, I guess one of the things is to make sure that your grill, perhaps you're getting it out of the garden shed or the store or the lock-up or the garage or something for the first time this summer. You've got to give it a good clean first of all, haven't you?
Absolutely, and I think that is important regardless of whether it's been in storage or whether it's been in use, because sometimes, especially when we're visiting other homes, we want to be very careful that the grill grate itself is immaculately clean and free of any gluten. So that means heating that up on high heat and taking your grill brush or some crumpled aluminum foil or some crumpled steel wool and really giving it a good scrub and making sure that everything is off of that grill grate.
Tell me what that foil's called again.
It's aluminium over across the pond there, but it's aluminum here in the States.
You realised what I was getting at. Yeah, I love the way you say it.
I had quite a long stay in Australia, so I am accustomed to the differences. Yes.
You know what? The very idea of cleaning a grill with aluminium foil is setting my teeth on edge because, that's just going to make an awful sound, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. You know what? I think I'm going to stick to the Brillo pads. Do you have Brillo pads, the kind of wool pads with soap in?
We do. We have Brillo. Wear gloves when you're using those. They can get right into the fingertips. And steel wool is great as well if you can just buy the plain old steel wool. But whatever you have that you like to clean with, make sure that grate is nice and clean before you ever put the first food on there.
Absolutely, and of course a good wash afterwards, as you say, because of those flecks of steel wool. What if you're going around to someone else's, though? That's always a bit awkward, isn't it? Because you can kind of feel as though you're being a little bit imposing, checking something. What about, could you take some aluminium foil to actually put on that so you still get the heat, although you're not getting the flames?
Yes, there are a couple of options there, and you mentioned your aluminium foil. You could also use the disposable pans as well. One good thing to do with those is to take those pans or the foil and to poke holes in them so you do get the smoke or the flavor of the grill, but you don't have your food touching a grill grate if you are visiting someone else's home and you're not sure about the grill.
Okay, well, let's talk about the actual meats that you're going to be putting on. I mean, very often the food that perhaps you're going to be using is naturally gluten-free. I'm thinking of things like, if it's a chicken breast or a drumstick or something like that. Got a bit of a worry, though, when it comes to processed food, and that could be anything from sausages to burgers to almost anything else, if it's not, the actual piece of chicken or piece of fish.
Absolutely. If you're using a whole cut, like you said, of chicken or steak, that's wonderful. But when you get into the hot dogs and you get into the burgers and you get into the sausages, you do want to be careful there. You want to check those labels. Even if you're visiting someone else's home, it's always okay to ask. Explain very briefly your situation. Hello, I have this food issue. I'll become very ill if I do get any of these gluten ingredients. And, if we're having sausages, do you mind if I just take a quick peek at that packaging? Or, better yet, offer to bring the sausages or the hot dogs if you would like to, as you're offering to your host, as part of the meal. There are brands of hot dogs, sausages, that do have no gluten ingredients, and they're also free of those unnatural processed ingredients like nitrates and nitrites, which are also great to avoid.
And as you say, that is really good if you're going to offer to take some of the food, and because it can be a little awkward, can't it, if you turn up with your own 2 sausages or 1 burger or something, because that kind of flags you up as the odd one out. But if you go over the top and say, tell you what, I'll do all the sausages or I'll do all of the burgers, you know that everything that is burger shaped or sausage shaped on the grill is going to be yours and is going to be okay, and no one else need know.
Yes, absolutely. And it does make it a lot more comfortable for both the host and the guest, I believe.
Okay, now, obviously, with the hot dogs and with burgers comes the buns. Now we get into a whole different territory, don't we?
We do. And if you are at your own home, you can certainly supply those gluten-free products that are available. You have several large name brands here in the United States. I know you have some of those, like Udi's is one that you also have there in the UK, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are others that we have here, others you have. So you could use those. There are some that are better than others, so you may want to do a little quality test there with a couple of different brands before you have a big barbecue and invite everyone. You can make your own. And that's a little daunting if you've just started out on your gluten-free journey with baking, because that is the trickiest part for us to handle in the kitchen, is baking those breads, those yeasted breads. They can be tricky. But I think, these days we've come a long way. I've been gluten-free now for 7 years, and it seems that every day I find a brand new product. So they're available out there.
I can imagine walking into someone's back garden or backyard, as you might say, over there, and seeing that, okay, so the grill's over there, and over here, the other side, we've got the table with all the condiments on, and we've also got there all the burger buns sitting there, so that's fine, and I've brought my own, so that's not a problem at all. And then you go over to the grill, and someone's decided that, in fact, they're going to toast the burger buns before they put the hamburger in, and you think, oh no, just when I thought I had everything under control. How do you have that conversation with the chef or the host?
I think you have to really just be open and honest. Calling ahead and speaking with them after the invite or at the time of the invite is always acceptable. There's a very tactful way to do that. Just simply explain, I have a medical condition. We're not talking about a fad or a trend here, which unfortunately hurts those of us who do have celiac disease in the media, where that's promoted as a weight loss or just a celebrity trend of the moment. But just say, it's a medical condition, and gosh, I know, it sounds like such a bother, and I don't want to be a bother, but I really want to enjoy your company and your hospitality, and I do not want to become ill. So here are some sort of guidelines I have to follow, and I'm willing to help you along the way. I'd come over early and help you set up. I'll man the grill for you, that sort of thing.
Well, I was going to say that's the answer, isn't it? If you offer to do the cooking and you are there at the grill, at the barbecue, you can just make sure that everything is to your own satisfaction, and no one else even need know at all what it is that you're doing.
Right, and it's between you and your host, and I think that keeps it, the host doesn't feel uncomfortable for imposing upon their guests, and you don't feel uncomfortable as sort of, like you said, the odd man out. I do want to note about toasting bread on the grill. That does happen. I see it here. It's very popular. What I always tell people in my family, when we do go visit family and we have a big family barbecue, we make sure the grill is clean. We do all of the meat, make sure those are all completely gluten-free. That includes marinades and any seasonings that would be on meats. And then, if anyone with gluten-free bread wants a toast, we can put those on. And very last, the gluten eaters could put their gluten buns on there, and we're done with the grill.
Good thinking. Or pop inside and do the buns inside.
Absolutely. But now, make sure you adhere to that order if you do it that way.
Indeed, yeah. It's thinking it. Now, I mentioned condiments a few moments ago, and most condiments, really lucky. So the mayonnaise and the ketchups and so on, usually they are gluten-free. Bit more of a problem with the more kind of saucy brown sauces. They've often got more ingredients in for a start. And I know looking recently for those brown sauces, or the HP sauces we might call it over here, can be a little bit problematic, the barbecue sauce and so on. I'm always worried that you can go somewhere and there's a jar, say, of Heinz tomato ketchup, and you think, Heinz, that's cool, that's good. And then you think to yourself, but how do I know that just because it says Heinz on the outside, they haven't actually put a cheaper brand inside? The actual host, because it's a picnic, they don't have to show off, they know they're expecting loads of guests. We'll cut a bit of we'll save a few pennies and we'll put a cheaper version inside. You don't know that, do you?
You don't know that, and that's a very good point. Ketchup, we sort of, or tomato sauce, as you call it, we assume is gluten-free. That was one of the first questions I personally asked when I went gluten-free and found out I had celiac disease. I was in the Whole Foods market and was going to buy ketchup, and I called a friend who had celiac, and I said, is ketchup gluten-free? And he said, well, that depends. So you do have to read those labels. The majority of ketchups, mayonnaises, mustards are gluten-free. Read those labels. You really can't monitor your host. Maybe you should bring the condiments. I'm not sure. Maybe the cookout should be at your house if you're, you know what I mean? You do get into situations where I don't think there is an answer for that one. Ketchup is, in restaurants, can be a frightening thing. I witnessed something, which is an aside from the barbecues, but it's very important to point out. There's an article over on my website about this, and I witnessed someone take a steak knife and cut a child's burger with a gluten bun in half at another table, and then proceed to take a brand new bottle of the ketchup on the table and take the same knife and put into the bottle to sort of break that air bubble to make the flow start.
Yeah.
And so that whole bottle was contaminated. So there are endless possibilities for contamination, like you mentioned, refilling bottles or putting gluten in a bottle. And you also want to consider the cross-contamination using the knife that goes in the mayonnaise jar, if it's not a squeeze bottle, spreading on a gluten bun, putting back in that container.
Yes, the squeeze bottles are much more reassuring, aren't they?
Absolutely.
They're less likely to be refilled. Although I have been worried about, if I've been in a cheap cafe or diner, I'm worried about whether it is, the Heinz or something like that. So
Sure.
I guess that's what I was getting. Your mention there of what happened in the restaurant or the cafe reminds me of I went out. I took my parents out for afternoon tea, and look, they've got gluten-free cake up there. So as I was queuing up, I realised that 3 or 4 people in front of me, they asked for the gluten-free cake. And so the server got out the tongs and they got a slice of gluten-free cake and they put the tongs back next to the ordinary cake. And I thought, no, you're using the same tongs for all the cake, aren't you?
That's right.
So
it's not worth it.
I passed on that.
You should.
Absolutely.
Good call.
Now, also, I'm a stickler for keeping my hands free, because I'm always worried about, touching things, just generally when I've been out and perhaps on public transport and things. I always like to have clean hands before I eat. That's particularly important, isn't it? Not so much for germs, but in a situation like this where you've got people who are eating with their fingers, eating the gluten-filled buns, and then making a grab for the butter knife or making a grab for the beers or making a grab for the squeezy bottle of ketchup.
Absolutely, and that's one thing I was going to bring up. You do have to be aware, even though those squeeze bottles are terrific in terms of not putting a utensil back in to cross-contaminate, we do want to still consider someone went back for seconds on the mustard or the ketchup and they're squeezing. They've got a gluten-contaminated hand, and then you go pick it up. Then you go pick your bun up that's gluten-free, and if you're very sensitive to a minuscule amount, that in fact could be enough to trigger something in an individual with celiac disease. It really depends on your level of sensitivity, of course, but it's a real possibility.
And very often you hear, or even you think to yourself, hold on, I'm ill. I've taken loads of precautions, but it only takes a small speck, doesn't it, to set off that chain reaction? Yes,
I carry with me, and this may seem a little odd to some people, but it doesn't bother me. I'd rather stay healthy than not look odd all the time. So I have little wet wipes, a very small packet, just have those tucked in my purse, and pull those out. And when I feel like there's a situation, I just take one out and do a good once over. The wet wipes, antibacterial ones or regular, are much, much better than the liquid sanitizer gels for getting gluten protein off the hands.
And also, if you want to give the bottle a rub down, you can hardly do that with a gel, can you?
Right, absolutely. So the wipes are by far the way to go.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm just kind of thinking whether I would be comfortable doing that, and I'm thinking it's so much easier sometimes being a woman, and I'm thinking of this kind of situation, because you've got your wet wipes in a handbag, and guys don't have a handbag. And also, you can give the impression that you maybe not be doing it for yourself, but you could be doing it because, oh, look, that bottle looks a little bit messy, and I'm doing it for the kids so they don't get, ketchup-y hands. And if a guy did that, they may go, oh, come on, you wuss. What are you doing?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
May look a bit feminine. We could always, put it off on our tidying up and looking fresh. But true, it is different for men, and that's where if you do have a lady friend there, you could always, discreetly go over and sort of, ask her for the wet wipe from her purse. Don't have your own purse, but, the reality of it is there are uncomfortable social situations, and one of the main issues, I think, a lot of times we attribute social problems with children who have a food allergy or celiac disease or a special diet. But really, it crosses all of our age groups through the lifespan, because we all feel awkward and uncomfortable at times discussing it in a restaurant, having to mention it, being that odd person out every time, needing the special treatment. And it does make one feel uncomfortable.
So finally, let's wind up with you telling us how we can read more about this article and all the other fantastic articles that you've got up on your websites.
Sure, yes. Please visit me at glutenfreegigi.com. That's my website. And you can find me in all of the social media channels like Twitter and Facebook at glutenfreegigi.
Still to come, we have our tweets of the week, and also we're going to be looking at that new booklet. It's a really nice little booklet that we received from Coeliac UK in the course of the week. So we'll be running through some of that. There's an awful lot of words in there, but really, really well laid out. And the frontispiece from Sarah Sleet, the chief executive, and it's all about their pledges on things like food prices and labelling and eating back and availability and so on. And what they're after you to do is to make a pledge yourself, and also suggest some other ways that Coeliac UK can help us, can help you. Hopefully you're a member, because it's really, really important for you to be a member, because you get all sorts of advantages, including the app that we were talking about last week. So you get you're able to get into the inner sanctum of that smartphone app if you're a member, and also it means that you can get the food and drink directory, very important, which is the big thick book running to several hundred pages. It's kind of pocket size all the same, that you can have in your kitchen, so you can look up the kind of food, exact food, by the name, the product, the brand, the size, the flavour of what you can get when you are going to the supermarket that you know you can eat. Really, really important stuff. So that is on the way. Also, in a few moments' time, is there gluten in glutinous rice? And first of all, what we'll do is we want to talk about food for a few moments' time. Because after all, that is, when it comes down to it, it is the basic thing about our condition, isn't it? It is the food, it is the gluten in the food which is causing us all the heartache, or ache somewhere else, the stomach ache, or maybe somewhere else if you get my drift. And I'm not just necessarily talking about the brain or the bones. Okay, so what about this? Italians, it is claimed, have developed a coeliac-friendly gluten. I'll say that again. Italians have developed a coeliac-friendly gluten, according to Gazzetta del Sud.it. So a group of scientists in Italy say they've developed a method to modify a protein in wheat gluten so it doesn't spark the damaging reactions suffered by people with celiac disease. They'll make it possible to produce gluten-friendly wheat flour. They say, quote, "We could be faced with a scientific discovery of the highest level," says Professor Maurizio Ricci. Well, this sounds intriguing, doesn't it? The team says they've created a way to modify the gluten protein in wheat to interrupt the chemical reaction that is damaging to people with celiac disease. The process involves, and this sounds really complex, this is really scientific, Yeah, it's very, very involved. It takes ages to do. You can't begin to understand the process, the length of time, the intricacy involved, the amount of different chemicals they're using, different machinery, the number of staff. So, I mean, get prepared. This is what they have to go through, the long, involved, arduous process of modifying the gluten protein in wheat to interrupt the chemical reaction. Here it is. The process involves treating wheat grains with, well, I mean, with the chemical reaction is just astounding. The involvement, the research they've done to work out the different kinds of chemicals they needed, how many, what proportions, the amount, what you do with it. And in the end, they've come just down to one chemical. One single chemical can do this. Okay. The process involves treating wheat grains. I don't know whether you've heard of this chemical. Huh? I'll say it slowly for you because it's a bit tricky for me to get my tongue round and you may not be familiar with this chemical. Okay. The process involves treating wheat grains with water. Yeah, water. That's how you pronounce it. And what do you do then? Do you put it in some kind of spinning device to shake something out? Do you zap it with some kind of laser gun? Do you put it into some high pressure hold? Do you squeeze something out? Do you let it float around in zero gravity while you're pummeling atoms at it? The process involves treating wheat grains with water and microwaving them for a short period before they're ground into flour. That's it. That's it. Well, I mean, obviously you won't be able to do that at home. I'm not suggesting you get some wheat grain, you pour on some water and chuck it in the microwave for 2 minutes until it goes ping. Not suggesting that at all. It's obviously a bit, but isn't that interesting? I thought so anyway. It's also possible to extract gluten from wheat flour, but once this is done, the flour loses some of its characteristics that make it well suited as an ingredient for many foods. So you can take the gluten out, but what they're saying is that then if you just do that rather than their method, you may have tried this with gluten-free wheat starch. It's not quite the same, is it? But this breakthrough is a result of research by Professors Aldo Di Lucia and Carmen Lamacchia, and they've deposited a patent for their method of creating the flour in Italy and the rest of the world. They've started talks with companies interested in using it. Boy, oh boy, it's a breakthrough we've been waiting for. Over the years and the months and the weeks and the episodes, we've been talking about the different pills that we need to take and when they're going. Just last week we were talking about a pill that'll be on the market, what was it, 2018? But years away. This is round the corner. We'll be able to tuck in to some ordinary bread, inverted commas, both with ordinary and indeed bread, in weeks. I'll be popping down to the store almost before the show's been recorded. Hold on. They've started talks with companies interested in using it. Yeah. The test is by putting it on the market. Yeah. Aren't you missing out a stage? But we won't be putting it onto the market until we've done a study of the gluten-friendly product on celiac patients. Bit of a backward step then. I can't help thinking that it's a little bit way off. But they've got the concept, they've got the idea, they reckon it works, but they've yet to actually test it on people with celiac disease. Interesting all the same. Interesting stuff. So that is how to get the gluten out of wheat grains. If you want to try something at home, which is a little bit easier, telegraph.co.uk came up with the idea of making pizza dough from the pulp that's left over from making juices. I sometimes overuse the word intriguing, don't I? I think the word intriguing comes up almost in every single episode, but there are so many fantastic innovative ways of cooking and eating, or the research could be described as using that I word. And I think this is another one. This is a fantastic idea. The gluten-free pizza base made from juicer pulp. I'll tell you about that in a second as well. Also, I'll tell you about whether there's gluten in glutinous rice. And I'll tell you about the Coeliac UK pledges that popped through our letterbox earlier on this week, right here on GFree Radio. So we were at a posh do the other day. It was someone's 60th birthday, and we went to a posh Royal Yacht Club, which is obviously on the coast in England. I won't give you any more details than that because I'm going to tell you what happened. So I contacted the caterers at this yacht club, and boy, oh boy, it's a really posh yacht club. You know, they've got some, as you can imagine, they've got a kind of, not quite a marina because of where it's actually based. It's more on a river than a coast, so a marina geographically wouldn't quite have worked. But essentially, you know, there are moorings there with some really nice yachts. You know what I'm talking about? Some really nice, really posh ones, bright and shiny and new, and the setting was superb, and we were there on the veranda. The flags were fluttering, the sun was going down. It looked absolutely amazing. And yeah, really, really fantastic location. Contacted them before I went and said, so I've got celiac disease, so is there anything you can provide? And they wrote back and said, yeah, in fact, I'm the catering manager and I'm a celiac as well. We will plate something up for you. That's not a problem at all. So that was very reassuring. Fortunately, I ate before I went. The journey was about 2 hours. So I thought, you know what, by the time, you know, take the drive into account, and then we'll be waiting for a couple of hours, perhaps before some food comes out. So don't know how much. Let's just eat before we go, which is often quite a good idea, isn't it? So I did that. Turned up, the food came out. I waited for the massed hordes to. Actually, it was that posh. It wasn't massed hordes. No. People were queuing up very politely. And then I went over to one of the wait staff and said, hi, I'm the person that wrote to your catering manager and you were going to put something aside for me. Is that okay? Oh, yes, she said. I'll go and get that from the back. And out she came with a plate, cling film over the top, and on the plate, well, let me tell you what was on the main buffet experience. It was seriously, you can go to some buffet events, can't you? And you can look at some rather tired, limp lettuce, some curly sandwiches, a bowl of crisps, and, frankly, a bit of quiche, which as soon as you lift it up is so soggy that it collapses in your hand. This was probably the best buffet that I have seen for many a long year. It was really good. Okay, so there were sandwiches with the crust cut off. I didn't actually see what the filling was, but they looked really well presented. Okay, there were the vol au vents. There was the big quiche that you could take some slices off that looked firm yet fresh and cool. You know, it wasn't sweating because it hadn't been out for ages. There were Scotch eggs, if you're not familiar with Scotch eggs. We spoke about these, didn't we, on the programme a few weeks ago. So these are the hard-boiled eggs encased in sausage meat and breadcrumbs. They're rather nicer than that description might give them credit for. There were the vol au vents. There was a cake stand. There were a couple of cake stands. Ones with cakes on, little cupcakes. There was a fantastic cheese board. Great big large slices of cheese, really well presented. There were the inevitable crisps and nuts and so on. And there was another cake stand. Oh, there was some individual prawn cocktails. And there was another cake stand with different smoked fish on as well, which looked absolutely, it was really, really well laid out. And out came the wait staff, this waitress, with my plate. And it was 2 pieces of bread covered in cling film. I'm giving that a bit of a disservice because there was actually something on the bread. Yes, on one slice of gluten-free bread, there was some grated cheese. And on the other side of the bread, on the other piece of bread, there was a prawn cocktail. So there was the prawn cocktail just kind of spread over one slice of bread, and over the other slice of bread was the grated cheese. So it wasn't even as a sandwich. So thanks very much. That's great. Oh, thanks very much. I was polite. There's no point otherwise, is there? I hadn't paid for the event. I was someone's guest. I kind of tutted inwardly to myself and made a bit of a joke about it when I went back and went back to my friends and colleagues. And it was rather difficult to eat. Grated cheese on a slice of bread. So I was standing there, I was standing up with the plate in one hand, had to find somewhere to put the glass down, had to go and get a fork, and then was, because you couldn't stand up and use a knife and fork with the plate, so cutting up the bread, which was collapsing with the grated cheese, which was then falling off, and then, it was a bit of a disaster. And it just made me think again, why don't people understand? Because, well, first of all, surely you could have made those into sandwiches and cut them into fingers or quarters or triangles and just made it look a little bit nicer. Yeah? Surely you could have come out with a bag of crisps that plainly says on the back, gluten-free. There was a supermarket up the road. Surely you could have got a cake or a small bakewell or a slice of cake or something from there to put on the plate as well. You could have gone the extra mile and done some cocktail sausages which are gluten-free, or the Scotch eggs gluten-free that we've spoken about on the programme before. You could have done it a little bit better. It reminds us back at Easter time when I took my parents out for a Sunday afternoon tea at a local kind of walled, really intriguing place, a walled kind of medicine garden. It's an old, the old walled garden of a huge country house estate. The country house has now been turned into flats. A lot of the estate has now been turned over to farmland or other housing. But the walled garden has been made into a kind of parkland area where they do kind of Tai Chi and things like that, and they do some, the yoga, and they have some musical quartets there, and they have some displays and small food festivals and so on. And then the working area of the walled garden, all the shed areas, they've turned over to local people. So in one, they do some massage therapy, and in another one, there's an artist at work. Another one they do kind of knitting and looming. Another one sells old kind of antique garden equipment and memorabilia. Another one is an organic food stall which has the artisan cheeses and local produce and local fruit and veg, that kind of thing. It's a really, really nice place to go to. And they got a cafe. Have you got any gluten-free cake? No, we've run out. Okay. And then subsequently speaking to the manager afterwards, we've run out. Oh, well, that was a bit of a shame. Couldn't you have got some of the kind of, inverted commas, long life cake in from one of the supermarkets that comes, the slices that comes wrapped in the cellophane? Oh, no, we don't do that. Well, why? Yeah, we don't do that because we like to have fresh cake. We only do fresh cake. Made locally. Right. It is just that from my point of view, I would prefer mass-produced long life cake that is there rather than fresh, locally baked cake which isn't there. Yeah. Well, we just ran out. Right. They didn't see my point, and I would have thought, fresh, gluten-free cake, brilliant. Not a problem, fantastic, have it there, on offer, and if you have a rush on it, and it runs out, then you open up the cupboard, and you get out the pre-made sliced cellophaned cake, and you say to the person that's requesting the gluten-free cake, terribly sorry, you know, an hour ago we had a delectable strawberry cream sponge here made by Mrs. Miggins, but two streets away. Unfortunately, we've run out of that. However, we do have this. Would you like this? It's from Sainsbury's. It's not what we usually do. Come back another day. We'll probably have the fresh cream, walnut, or chocolate, or carrot, or banana cake on offer. But at the moment, we've got this. Is that okay? And I would have probably gone, you know what? That's a shame. But absolutely. But as it was, everyone else in the party had tea and cake. I had tea and nothing. So, pizza dough made from pulp that's left over from making juices, from the telegraph.co.uk and Rose Lloyd Owen. For the base, 3 carrots, 3 apples, 4 large handfuls of kale, 30 grams of gram flour, chickpea flour, and 1 egg. Obviously, the toppings you can choose yourself. And this is what you do. Juice the carrots, apples and kale. You can use any juice pulp really, but vegetables are better than fruits because they're less watery. And also avoid celery, Rose says, because it can be a little bit stringy. Stir the flour and egg into the pulp until it forms a kind of wet dough. Add more flour if your mixture is too wet. Add a good pinch of salt and pepper and spoon it onto a baking sheet. With your hands, it's too wet for a rolling pin, flatten it out into a neat circle about 1/2 centimetre thick, dehydrate in the oven for 2 hours until dry and crisp. Pop over the topping, put under a hot grill. Bob's your uncle, Sally's your aunt. Question we got asked on Twitter during the course of the week: is there gluten in glutinous rice? Well, it's a sticky rice. You can call it waxy rice, sweet rice, pearl rice. Glutinous rice can be a particularly unusual and difficult name. Does it actually have gluten in? No. I mean, it's the fact that glutinous rice is kind of glue-like. It's sticky when it's cooked. Remember we did a series, didn't we? Either side of Christmas, I believe, or just after Christmas, about various different kind of rices. And it's all down to the starch content, essentially. The starch in rice has a couple of different components, amylose and amylopectin. Medium and long grain rices have a higher proportion of amylose. The starch in short grain glutinous rice is almost all amylopectin, and that means it's going to be more moist and more sticky as well. It means that you're going to not need quite as much water to cook it. It's broken down really easily. It's often soaked and steamed instead of boiled. That's often a good trick, isn't it? Just to soak the rice in pre-boiled water, and then it takes on much more of a fluffy texture. Glutinous rice not as sweet. It's also called sweet rice. Not because it's sweet itself, but because it's often used to make sweet dishes. So, absolutely. Gluten-free diet. You're someone with celiac disease. You can eat glutinous rice with abandon, including in rice puddings. It's good for rice puddings as well. So, pass on those tips for you. Okay, so what about this this booklet that came in the post during the course of the week? With the intro from Sarah Sleet from Celiac UK, we're launching our Freed From campaign this summer that'll look to change the environment with those that celiac disease find themselves in. They've got 7 campaign goals for the next 7 years, and they're setting out what they want to achieve. Driving up diagnosis rates is really important. Why do they want to do that? Because it may you may think to yourself, well, if you do that, you're going to be costing the NHS. You're going to be causing much more of a problem for for the whole health system. But of course, as they point out, not only will it mean a lot fewer people are suffering once on a gluten-free diet, but every single person diagnosed adds another voice to the 150,000 diagnosed in the UK who want clearer food labelling, more gluten-free options outside of the home, and appropriate support from the National Health Service. But to achieve our goals, we need the help of our members, healthcare professionals, politicians, other charities, and you. So have a look at what we're focusing on over the next few pages, says Sarah Sleet, and then tell us what resonates most with you by sending back the form at the back. So we'll run through this very, very briefly. The challenge for the people who have celiac disease, 500,000 in the UK, and the average waiting time before you're diagnosed 13 years. Our pledge to confirm diagnosis for 250,000 more people by 2020, so that more people are freed from not knowing what's causing their symptoms, discomfort, pain and suffering. Pledge 2 is about anxiety, so it's the support for people who have celiac disease, more care and support about access to a dietitian. It's the advice, it's ongoing monitoring as well, including those all-important bone scans. Our pledge from Celiac UK: we want nobody with celiac disease to have to manage their disease alone. We will work to see that NHS support is the same nationwide, where access to dietetic advice and appropriate follow-up blood tests and investigations are the same for all, no matter where they live. Pledge 3 is marked up as hassle. Popping into a supermarket, convenience store or local grocers to pick up gluten-free items can lead to a lot of that hassle. 74% of those shopping for GFree complain of having to visit more than one store to pick up everything they want or need. Our pledge: we will challenge every retailer to stock a core range of staple gluten-free food across the UK, so that those that need to follow a basic gluten-free diet can do so with ease. Pledge 4. Celiac UK is the largest single funder of research into celiac disease in the UK. We commission research we help people with gluten-free diet. We help people in the food industry, it says. We've awarded grants worth over £1.3 million for research. Our pledge: to raise £1 million over 7 years to fund further research into celiac disease. Number 5, prices. Sometimes they can be 3 to 4 times as much more than the gluten-filled alternatives. Our pledge: gluten-free food should not cost 3 to 4 times as much as gluten-containing food. Quite simply, we want to see retailers and producers ask for a reasonable price so that everyone can access gluten-free substitutes. Number 6, doubt. The introduction of GFree labelling has made buying simpler, but manufacturers can change the ingredients from time to time, and suddenly something is not suitable. Cross-contamination problems. The may contain statements can vary. Our pledge: to have 10 of the top 20 food brands labelled gluten-free by 2020. And the next one is challenge of limited choice, so eating out. Our pledge: to have at least 2 gluten-free labelled options in each of the top 20 eating out chains. They're really simple, aren't they? They're really straightforward. I really don't think they're busting a gut. I mean that in the nicest possible way. These pledges are not out of reach. They're basic, they're attainable, they are not outrageous, I would have thought. So, what is the 8th goal? That's the challenge they're setting people who are with Celiac UK. What would your 8th pledge be? So, you can get in touch with them. If you want to know more about their work, incidentally, wherever you are in the world, they've got a fantastic resourced website which you can have a look at. It's really, really interesting stuff, and you can go there and find out much, much more. Celiac with an O, COELIAC, celiac.org.uk. So if you haven't got one of those little booklets recently and you are a member of Coeliac UK, get onto them, and I'm sure they'll pop one in the post in case it's got lost in the way. Coeliac.org.uk. Their phone number, incidentally, 01494 437 278 if you want to contact them. Coeliac_UK on Twitter. And really worth, if you're coming over to the UK on holiday and you really want some advice about where to shop or the chains that you can go to eat gluten-free, some fantastic places that you can go for that reassurance, that has got to be top of your list, the Coeliac UK website. And you heard about it here on GFree Radio. We'd really like to work much more closely with Coeliac UK and help spread the word on some of those, well, all of those pledges, all of those challenges over the next few years. So we've been speaking to Coeliac UK in the past, so hopefully we will be working much more closely with them in the future. And at the sound of the little bird, it means it's time to finish off the show with our GFree tweets of the week. We spoke with Jen Patchett recently, and Jen is the person who's putting together a support group for people with other allergies as well as celiac disease, whether it be an egg allergy or a dairy allergy, all sorts of different allergies. That is the support group, CEDF Celiacs. Their campaign for more gluten-free brands to exclude corn, egg and dairy from their products for celiacs with additional allergies. And you'll be hearing our chat with Jen Patchett coming up soon. So she says, great interview with GFree Radio. Read the need for more gluten-free products for people with other allergies. Rai Tay, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. And their tweet, well, they live in Taiwan, and they say, Warburton's gluten-free brown rolls, I was so curious, I had some delivered all the way from Britain. Warburton's Newburn Bakehouse in the UK, are you listening? Your rolls have got all the way to Taipei, Taiwan. So someone is a great fan of yours. I'm sure you can make a little bit of marketing out of that. And one of the men behind Warburton's Newburn Bakehouse, Chris Hook, we spoke to recently. So listen out for an interview with Chris coming up on the show in the next few weeks and months. Also, we've spotted this in the week from Eat N Gluten on Twitter. I Eat Wheat with 2 T's, who says, I only befriend gluten-free people in case I need to subdue them easily in times of war. Which we do kind of like these pithy 140 character comments, and sometimes they are taking a bit of a pop at people with celiac disease. But heck, we're strong. We've got to be. We can take it, can't we? Of course we can. Katerina Tanti says on Twitter, courtesy of Susan Jane Health, my 8-year-old said, Mummy, they taste even better with the gluten-free inside. Isn't that cute? Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings. And also Samantha, Sam65SE, easing on to Sunday. Totally agree with Peter on the GFree Radio Show over the 2-class labelling. Yeah, this was something we mentioned on the programme a couple of weeks ago with the proposed new EU labelling. We need more choice, not less, which I agree could result. And also she goes on to say in another tweet, Fab podcast, enjoyed listening. Thanks very much indeed. And also about that same topic, Sassy Grand 70, Dilly Pat. Thanks, Peter. Usual high standards. Made notes on the programme this week. 2-class labels, why? NGCI, no gluten-containing agreements. Classic non-GF roll with GF meal made me laugh. That was a comment from a show a couple of weeks ago. Gluten Libra 805, Gluten Libra Mom. You guys are awesome. And also Darwin's Restaurant, who seem to be fans of the show as well. They're based in Dublin. A restaurant offers contemporary international cuisine with an extensive menu catering for carnivorous, vegetarian and celiac diners. That's interesting stuff, isn't it? We want to stay in touch with what's important to our GFree customers. Seems like you are experts. Well, very much appreciate that. We hope to be, and hopefully we've passed on some words of advice and some thoughts over the course of the last hour or so about different ingredients, different foods, different research, our own personal feelings and comments. Some might say it's even a rant, but hopefully it's maybe stirred a few feelings in you about something that you've been through. And if it has, maybe there's a story, a comment, a suggestion, some advice, an article, something you want to say, do get in touch with us. GFree Radio at hotmail.com. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GFree Radio. Now, a slightly different show for the next couple of weeks because next week, this coming weekend, so across the Friday, Saturday and Sunday, it is Europe's biggest gluten-free show. It's actually called the Allergy and Free From Show. It's in London at the Grand Hall Olympia, 4th, 5th and 6th of July. And also they've got various other things going on there as well. I think there's a back pain show, which they've got in the Grand Hall as well. And also there's the vegetarian show. So all sorts of things going on. Now, let me pass on a few words of advice. If you go to allergyshow.co.uk, you'll be able to see much more information about the show, Europe's biggest. But also, their strapline, countless gluten-free solutions. It is huge. Also, don't pay for the tickets. Do not pay for the tickets. That is if you have a little hunt around some of the blogs and some of the services, and I'm sure even on the Coeliac UK website as well, you will be able to find free tickets. Do not just turn up there and pay on the door, because you could save yourself, I think it's 10 or 15 quid. Okay, so there are free tickets to be had if you have a little bit of a hunt around. It's not too difficult to find those free tickets. So that is on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 4th, 5th, 6th of July at the Grand Hall in Olympia. And as last year, we will be there as well. So we'll be recording some interviews for the show. I'll be there, microphone in hand, bedecked in our GFree Radio shirt, so which says GFree Radio on the front and the back. So if you see me there, tap me on the shoulder, as long as I'm not actually recording at the time. Say hi, because I'd really love to see you. Pass on your thoughts about the show. Maybe pass on a bit of advice about what stall you've been to, what stand you've had a chat with someone, what exhibitor you've bought from, who you've had a taste test with. That'll be really fantastic to see you. So do say hello. And that is at the Allergy and Free From Show in London, the Grand Hall Olympia. It's a much bigger venue than they've ever had before. As I say, they're kind of joining it with a few other shows as well. So I'll be easily identifiable with my GFree Radio shirt on, and also a press pass round my neck as well. I've got access all areas, as you might imagine. And that's about it. So what I was saying was, we're going to be recording all sorts of stuff there, and we're going to be putting out some of those interviews over the next couple of 3 weeks. Okay, so that's the reason why the next few weeks are going to be slightly different on the GFree Radio Show. We are the world's only weekly podcast for people with celiac disease or who choose to live a gluten-free life. Various ways you can get in contact with us. gfreeradio@hotmail.com, or via Twitter, we're at GFree Radio. And I'll be with you next week as usual with our special shows. Back to normal a few weeks after that. In the meantime, do keep in touch, stay happy, stay healthy, and be G-free. Hello, it's me again, Peter Stewart on the GFree Radio Show. I just wanted to pop back and pass on one more comment which didn't have time to make it to the full recording of our show this week, and this is particularly time sensitive, so I hope you'll bear with me as we talk through this email which I've received in the last few minutes here to GFree Radio. And this is from Nick Harrison, who's talking about an event which is happening on the 29th of this month, so you may have missed it by the time you hear this. But essentially, it's around a McDonald's design your own burger competition. Really interesting stuff. And Nick writes to me, thought you'd like to know about McDonald's and their unwillingness to not allow people who designed a gluten-free burger to take part in a nationwide competition. He says, I'm one out of 3 people who have been shortlisted out of 12 following the voting over the last month, and I've been told to told the following to take part in the final. So it seems to have been a competition where you put together your own flavours and your own different ingredients to come up with the new McDonald's burger. Obviously, that's a great credit, and it would be fantastic publicity for you and something almost kind of worthy to be done. However, even though there are gluten-free buns in some parts of the world from McDonald's, notably, I believe, in the Netherlands and some Scandinavian countries, they are not in the UK, despite a push by some people to get them into McDonald's fast food outlets. So, Nick has sent me a copy of the email which has come from McDonald's, and it says, after showing your amazing creative skills to create a burger on our online burger building site, online votes have shown that you've created one of the most popular burgers. You've therefore been declared a potential McDonald's My Burger finalist. And it goes through the details, and the main competition is in the kitchen of McDonald's. You can make your burger creation on the 29th of June, so you can see that is in a few days' time. It is this weekend as we record the show. He'll get a night's accommodation, he gets his travel expenses and so on, and you've got to be resident in the UK, you've got to have all sorts of notifications that you are a UK resident and so on, everything that you would expect. Then it says, we note that your burger creation is currently named The Dreamer GF EF, which implies the product is gluten, dairy and egg-free. McDonald's UK does not currently provide gluten-free buns, and none were available on the My Burger Builder site to select when you built your burger creation. In addition, the current setup of our restaurants is such that we would not be able to guarantee the prevention of cross-contamination with gluten, dairy or egg when preparing this type of product. As such, the name of your burger creation would be misleading, and in accordance with the rules, will require you to change it to a name that is acceptable to McDonald's in order to continue as a finalist in the My Burger promotion. By continuing with registration, you agree to this. If you do not agree to change the name of your burger creation, you will not be able to proceed in the promotion, and your place as a finalist will be forfeited. And so it goes on and then goes back to the regular part of the email about the number of people who can accompany you, and please click on this to complete the form and so on. So what do you make out of that? What should Nick do? He's only got a couple of days at time of recording to actually make his decision. So by the time you hear this, he probably has made his decision. Should he opt out completely? Should he change the name of the burger and go along with them? Should he change the constituent parts of the burger and lie down like a puppy? Or should he change the name of the burger and go along and make a fuss? What should he do? What would you do? Hopefully we'll find out in a few days' time and be able to bring that information to you. Incidentally, if you'd like to follow what Nick does, maybe send some words of support to him, then you can do that. Let me give you his Twitter details, because you might be able to get in touch with him and find out exactly what he did do. So his details are Gluten-Free Brit on Twitter. His name is Nick. Gluten-Free Brit is his Twitter name. So if you want to get in touch with him, then you can do that. Or alternatively, if you'd like to get in touch with McDonald's and find out what their problem is, it is at McDonald's on Twitter. Interesting times. If you'd like to get in touch with Burger King, it's at Burger King, and you may want to ask them similar questions about the provision of people with gluten, dairy or egg allergies. This is Peter Stewart on GFree Radio.
And that was the GFree Radio Show with Peter Stewart. And you. Thanks for listening. And remember, until next time, be good, be healthy, and be G-free.